Tonight, we have Sophie Earhart and Jason Mazurowski
Yep.
of Northeast Wilderness Trust. And I have a quick anecdote about a piece of property they're going to talk about. It was about 10 or 15 years ago, Susan Sawyer got a call from Peter Meyer, who's Hugo Meyer's son. And Hugo Meyer, with the Meyer family, Hugo amassed the land in the 50s. And he was buying land for 50 bucks an acre. And he amassed a huge piece of Woodbury. And by, his son John took over as forester and was just going to manage the land and do the forestry work there. And they did selective cutting for 50 years. Never really hit it too hard. I was always impressed by the forestry work that they did. But in any case, Peter got a call, John's brother, another one of Hugo's sons, he got a call from a wind farm developer and approached the family to put wind turbines on Woodbury Mountain. And Peter asked Susan Sawyer to what the Conservation Commission would have to say about that. And there was a major wind pushback at that time. And fortunately, it never became any kind of a battle because the family decided not to do it, but they wanted to put 5 wind turbines. So over time, that was a close call, that didn't happen. And then over time, at the Conservation Commission meetings, we would talk about, well, what's going to happen with Meyerland? We didn't really have any control over the situation because it was privately held and yada, yada, yada. And it was always a concern. And then one morning, Michael called me and he said, Paul, I've got some good news. He said, Myers have sold their land to the Northeast Wilderness Trust. And I thought, holy smokes. And I remember saying to Michael, that's the best thing that could have happened. And here these folks are, they're going to tell us all about it.
Thank you. What a warm welcome. That's great. Yeah, we're really happy to be here. I'm Sophie Earhart. So my role is the Vermont land steward. So I steward the properties on the ground, monitor them throughout Vermont. And this is my colleague, Jason.
I'm Jason Mazurowski. I'm the wildlands ecologist at Newt, and I'm a Woodbury resident. So I lived in Woodbury before I worked for Newt, and that's how I got to know Northeast Wilderness Trust, was living here and being neighbors. So I'll allude to that a little bit more. So I have a little bit more of a perspective from the community side here. But I'll be talking more about like what we've learned about the preserve since we've acquired it and have spent so much time on it.
So thank you for inviting us to the Conservation Commission, and thanks for hosting to the library. This is really great. So this is a photo of the preserve, as you might have guessed. Photo was taken by a drone somewhere above Eagle Ledges, kind of looking up through the center-ish of the preserve. The Woodbury Mountain Range is up there in the northeast, as you can see. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. I don't want to use that. So most of the photos in our presentation were taken at the preserve. And Northeast Wilderness Trust owns the land, and the Vermont River Conservancy holds the Forever Wild conservation easement on the whole property.
How many acres?
About 66,257 or something. It's the largest non-governmental wilderness area in the state of Vermont. So this is kind of a big deal in your backyard. We love this preserve. So this is a photo by Liz Thompson. This was taken on the preserve, Red Admiral on a blueberry. I'm just going to go over quickly what we're hoping to cover today. And first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about the trust, if you're not familiar at all with us, and talk about our work, why we focus on rewilding and wilderness areas. And then Jason, like he said, is going to talk about what's so special about this particular preserve and area. We'll introduce you, thanks to Eric Perkins, to some of the wildlife, some of the residents on the preserve, and then we'll have time for a little question and answer and conversation, if you like. So, 10,000 foot level, just quickly about Northeast Wilderness Trust. We're almost a quarter of a century old. We were founded in 2002, and we're a regional land trust. We work across the Northeast, so all of New England. Well, we don't have any preserves in Rhode Island. Definitely have more preserves in northern New England. But we do work in all of the states there, and also in the northeastern part of New York, the Adirondack, Champlain area of New York State. And we were started to address kind of a vacancy in the land trust arena, which is we're the only regional land trust that focuses exclusively on forever wild conservation. So there's so many good land trusts, local land trusts all over the Northeast doing really important work, conserving, farmland with easements or places for sustainable forestry operations, for recreation, for access. And there wasn't a lot focused only on ecological reserves, the kind of thing we do. So that's why we were formed, and we see our work as complementary to all these other kinds of conservation and things that are happening with land, but it's just what we focus on. We are, by tree time, we're pretty young. We're not quite 25 years old, but we think we're pretty mighty. This year we reached an important milestone. We conserve over 100,000 acres in the Northeast. And we like to say that everything we conserve has the potential to be a future old growth forest, which is, as you know, pretty rare in our area. So as far as what we mean by wild, if you're familiar with the definition of wilderness in the Federal Wilderness Act or the Forever Wild designation in the Adirondack region, what Harvard Forest calls wildlands, it's all kind of the same thing. We're talking about places that the land is left to its own will, basically. So self-willed land, natural processes shape the landscape and the ecological communities as opposed to people doing that. And we're visitors in all of these places, wilderness areas. So we visit, we study. There's a lot of, Jason's going to talk about some of the studies happening on Woodbury right now. We study, maybe do art, we engage in quiet, low impact recreation, or just, appreciation. But we don't live in these places, we don't leave structures in these places, we don't build roads in these places, we don't make our living extracting anything from the land here. It requires some humility to recognize that nature is best at forming these complex, resilient ecosystems that are adapted to their particular time and place. We're good at doing other things for management, like if we want to be favoring certain species or, just other producing food and timber and that. But nature makes us very resilient, complex ecosystems, and we try to step back and let it do that. So I think you probably all have different reasons you feel like wild places matter. I'm just going to talk about kind of this little suite of things. And the most key thing I want to say is that forever wild conservation is one of the most cost-effective and kind of immediate things that we can do to address both rapid climate change and mass species loss. So we've kind of got these entwined crises right now of a biodiversity crisis and also what's happening with our climate. And wilderness conservation is actually a fairly cheap and quick way we can address those things. When we buy and conserve young to middle-aged forests and let them grow, then they can just sequester and store more and more carbon, and at the same time provide habitat to all of this wildlife that's struggling because of loss of habitat or loss of connectivity and climate change. Jason's going to talk about resilience in wild places a little bit. And by reciprocity, we're just talking about the land giving to us and us giving to the land. And, you know, when we visit and take care of these places, some of that exchange is happening. So this is a beautiful, old, messy, mossy forest. It's what a wild, resilient forest looks like. It's brimming with life. This is in Maine. This photo was taken at our Howland Research Forest. And it really captures a lot of why wild, old forests are so important for biodiversity. When Howland was purchased by Newt in 2007, it was already home to trees that had been approaching middle age back in Thoreau's time, when he wrote this about the Maine woods. There's a big research project there, and they're studying carbon storage in forests and all this stuff. And what did Shelby say about it? The imagery from space is one of the...
At one point, or I think it may still be the most photographed spot from space on Earth, because they've had towers there going back decades measuring carbon sequestration and the carbon exchange between these old trees. But for a long time, before satellite imagery was largely available across the entire landscape, it was one of the few places they took photos of from space. And so it still kind of bears that to this day.
Did Thoreau take this picture?
Yeah. He painted it. He was really talented. No, Shelby Perry took that picture. So, Jason, I don't know if you want to talk for a minute just about like the biodiversity that's shown here.
Yeah, so believe it or not, this might not look like it, but this is an old growth forest. They're rare in the Northeast, so a lot of us don't really know what a northeastern old growth forest looks like. And that's actually part of what our research is like, what do old growth forests actually look like? What are their characteristics? What's different about them than middle-aged forest? But most people think of an old growth forest and you think of like gigantic redwoods. In the East, we don't really have that. And sometimes large trees can be indicative of an old growth forest. Sometimes not so much. I took down a white pine on my property that was, 34-inch DBH. I thought the thing was ancient. It was 70 years old. And then some of these trees can be hundreds of years old. We cored a yellow birch on this property that dated back to the 1600s, but wasn't all that big. It was only really about this big around. So what makes an old growth forest it's structural. It's not so much a large tree, it's how the forest is built. So you get things that you just can't get in a young forest. And probably the greatest characteristic are what we call coarse woody debris. So that's just a fancy word for logs. So trees and harvested landscapes, all of that material, or most of that material, is removed and taken offsite. In an old growth forest, it's just left, and some of them can last for decades. And we had a pretty bad drought this last fall, if you all remember that. It's hard to, with all the melt going on, it's hard to remember that my spring was dry for like 4 months. But if during that drought period, it may not have rained for weeks, but you could open up one of those pieces of coarse woody debris and take out some of that decaying wood and wring it out like a sponge. Like you could just wring water out of it after months of no rain. So they provide moisture and nutrients, and that's their role in the ecosystem, is to be a place for seeds to germinate. And so those are often called nurse logs. And another thing that's indicative of old growth forests is a mixed age class. So you have young trees, middle-aged trees, old trees, all mixed together. New England at this point was mostly cleared and then mostly left to regenerate, all at about the same time. So if you look around, most trees are about the same age. If you look at an old growth forest, there's a good mix. So those are just some of the characteristics to look for when we're, often we find places. We found old forests on Woodbury. We're sitting there scratching our heads. We're like, is this an old growth forest? We don't really know. It looks like one. We core a couple trees. We think it might be one. But if it has all these characteristics, it's usually an old growth forest.
Thank you. So, this slide actually just shows some of the other carbon storage going on below ground. It's just kind of a graphic of a mycorrhizal network, the fungal network that's connecting the tree roots to each other and sharing carbon and also storing a lot of carbon in the actual soil. So one thing you may have noticed when I was talking about wildlands or wilderness is that I haven't referred to them as places that are pristine or remote or untouched by people. As a former Northeast Wilderness Trust director said, wilderness is not a special kind of place, but rather a special commitment we can make to any place. And most of us know in this room, I'm sure, the land use history in Vermont and across New England, really post-European settlement. 3/4 of the land was cleared by the late 1800s. So it did not look like it looks today. You know, it was cleared for timber, but also to create farmland. And this photo is from, let's see, the Vermont Historical Society, and it shows the White River from about a century ago during a log drive. So it's really important to recognize that wilderness conservation in New England isn't the same thing as what it would be in the Amazon or what it was out west 150 years ago. Our director of ecology phrased it by saying wilderness is a choice. It's about deciding to reserve some places, particularly for the non-human world, to experience freedom. So we've made that choice for Woodbury Mountain Wilderness Preserve, and this land has previously been managed, like you said, pretty well for timber. It's not like a complete, you know, clear-cut disaster out there. There's a lot of beautiful woods, and it's been treated pretty well. But now it's free to evolve for its own, not necessarily human purposes, although it will benefit us. So the trust is part of a global movement that consists of a lot of organizations that focus strictly on rewilding, but also many that have other conservation goals, but they do some rewilding as part of what their priorities are. I really like this quote by John Davis. It says, "Rewilding in essence is giving the land back to wildlife and wildlife back to the land." Kind of simple. Now, we're not going to get sea turtles, hawksbill sea turtles. However, this guy, Woodbury resident Sophie Veltrop, this is a wood turtle, and you've probably all maybe run into those. They're sometimes hard to find, but those are on the preserve. So really quickly, just going to give you the broad context. This is a map showing all of the conserved land in New England and New York, so the Northeast. And that's everything in white is protected in some way. So there might be farmland that's protected from development, or Forest Society of Maine, you know, people who are doing timber but are enrolled in some sustainable forestry easements. It could be state forests, national forests, ski areas, you know, everything. And it's about 25%. So it's a lot. However, very little of this is actually conserved as forever wild. That's what's forever wild. It's about 2 to 3% of the landscape is actually protected as wildlands or wilderness areas. And if you take the Adirondack Park in New York out of that equation, even that number drops. So there's really not very much that's conserved in that way.
Have you ever add in private lands that people have chosen to keep as forestry? It's not included in these pictures.
It would have been included in the other picture.
Okay.
Yep, so private land conservation, like if it's enrolled, you know, with an easement for sustainable timber, really all very good, good conservation work. But we need a little bit more of wildlands. And when we look at what would a target for that be, the wildlands, woodlands, farmlands, and communities, group out of Harvard Forest and Highstead, that they have a vision for the New England landscape. And what they say we need for a resilient, kind of hopeful future is to have 10% of our forests wild, and then not, or of the land, and 90% in other uses and other kinds of conservation for farms and forestry and all of that. So that's really all I wanted to say about our work at the Trust. And now I'm going to let the ecologist actually tell you about what's really cool about the preserve.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to trade seats. If
Yeah,
you can
we can
see
trade
this.
spots. And one thing I'll add about that 10% goal, that is, that's multiple organizations have arrived at a similar number, around 10%. And that's a minimum. We call that like the minimum for ecological integrity. We would like to see more than 10%, but that's sort of like, if we can get there, we're at 3.3% right now. If we could get to 10, that's sort of the minimum we need for a resilient landscape that's connected enough for species to move around. Because we know with a warming climate, species will move. And if we have 10% of the landscape as wildland, that gives them a lot more space and a lot more freedom. So that sort of magic 10% number, the state of Vermont has come up with that same goal for the Vermont conservation design, sort of independently. But it's a strong topic of debate right now is where we should set that threshold, and 10 is a starting point. And again, that leaves about 90% of the landscape for management. So oftentimes that's something we like to remind people. We want to see more wildlands, but we're not extremists out there saying we want all forests to be forever wild. We understand. We would rather see.
We have wood furniture too.
I burn wood to heat my home. We would rather see the wood coming from local sources, and so even if we were to reach that goal of 10%, we still have 90% of the landscape, or 90% of forests left for some form of active management. So, as I alluded to before, I am a Woodbury resident. This is my 4th winter here in Woodbury. I've started measuring things in winters. And I moved to Woodbury about 2 weeks before the Woodbury Mountain Wilderness Preserve became a thing. And so I did not know that when I closed on my property that I was going to be directly adjacent to the largest non-governmental wilderness in Vermont. It just was a happy accident. I was like, Woodbury's great. There's a lot of wild, open space to be. Did not know it was going to be forever wild. So a huge bonus.
Is the Woodbury Mountain, the whole mountain part of that?
Yes. So here's actually a map of the preserve. This is the most recent map that we have. It is still expanding gradually. So I first knew Northeast Wilderness Trust as my neighbors, and I would go out as a volunteer with Sophie and pick up trash and hang signs. And I'm an ecologist by training. I was an independent ecologist at the time, and I always thought, well, this is a really great organization. I got to know them really well. If they're ever hiring an ecologist, that's something I would like to do. So I had to jump at that when that happened. So I've been with the organization for about a year now. So this is the current extent of Woodbury Mountain Wilderness Preserve. It has several additions that have been added on in the last few years. And so we're now up to 6,257 acres. The summit of Woodbury Mountain is right about here. So a lot of the ridge of Woodbury Mountain is included. There's sort of this section right here that's out.
Jason, maybe point out where County Road is.
Yes,
along there.
so this is County Road.
Yeah.
Because we're on the Woodbury side now, so you're all familiar probably with the ridge.
Where's Greenwood Lake?
Greenwood Lake is right here. So the preserve kind of. Yep, Greenwood Lake borders it, and there's actually a parking area right with preserve access right at Greenwood Lake. There's a beautiful waterfall there.
New.
Yep. So the mountain itself is included, and then much of the area back in the Elmore Wolcott area is wetland. But our side is quite steep, quite mountainous. If you've ever been up there, you know that.
And do you know what mountain is made of? Sand or granite?
Yes, I have a
He's gonna
geologic
get
map
into
coming up. No, these are very good questions, and I anticipated them. So peeling back a step, in orange, this is the Woodbury Mountain Wilderness Preserve, which is forever wild, and this is sort of the broader conservation context. This is in a wildlife linkage corridor that we call the Kingdom to Worcester corridor. So we have these focal areas that we work with at Newt. So we strategically try, when we're looking at new preserves, we think, where can we put these pieces of the puzzle where we're more likely to be able to connect the landscape. So this one is in a linkage that we call the Kingdom to Worcester's. And so Woodbury Mountain kind of fills in this big gap, kind of stretching from Hardwick. And this would be the Worcester Woods out in Worcester and Elmore, owned by the state and managed by the state. So this is conserved land. It's not a wildland, but it is conserved. It's managed differently. There are different management recreational practices that go on there. So it's
This
not,
meaning the green part?
yes, yeah, the green part. So that's the C.C. Putnam State Forest. And then this would be the Worcester Range. And the ridgeline of the Worcester Range is, in practice, it is a wildland. There's no management that happens up there. It is set aside for biodiversity. But the distinction why it is not forever wild is it's actually a state natural area, which is akin to like an executive order. So at any moment, any governor can say that's no longer a wildland. So that is where the distinction is. We have a permanent easement on the Woodbury Mountain Preserve that says it can never be developed. And the Worcester Range and a lot of the most of the state natural areas have this other distinction where it's more of an executive order. But in practice, it is wild. It's not touched, it's not managed, it's left for biodiversity. So in the broader context, we have this totals about 100,000 acres right now of conserved land. So if you're on County Road bordering the preserve, you could venture out on conserved land all the way out to the Worcester Range if you wanted to. So it's a big chunk for Vermont of pretty wild land.
To the north, does it border Buffalo Mountain?
It does now. There's a new conservation easement, TNC, I think, or TNC funded it, and it's a local land trust in Hardwick, and I'm forgetting the name. But now from the Lamoille River to Buffalo Mountain is conserved.
It's still being worked on.
And it's still being worked on.
Northern Rivers Land.
Okay, Northern
That's right,
Rivers Land
Northern
Trust,
Rivers.
perfect. Awesome, I was hoping someone would know that. That's like, we just heard that a couple weeks ago, and I was really excited about that.
Jack's a major driving force with them.
Awesome, well, thank you. So peeling back a little bit more, regionally, these are the biophysical regions of Vermont. The county road is actually the dividing line between two biophysical regions. And so most of the Woodbury Preserve is in the northern Green Mountains. And then a tiny slice of it, called our spring addition to the preserve, is on the northern Vermont Piedmont. Basically the northern Green Mountains, thin soils, cold climate, you know what the mountains are like. Then the northern Piedmont is, picture like Marshfield, Plainfield, kind of more rolling hills, fertile soils. It's on a totally different geology. But some of the coldest pockets in the state can be in the Piedmont in these cold drainages, like we have here in Woodbury. So we're really at a crossroads, and that's reflected in the diversity of life we find on the property. So those biophysical regions are largely dictated by geology. And so here's a geologic map of the preserve. This is County Road right here. It runs right along a major fault that separates, these are hundreds of millions of years different age rock. So this would be the northern Green Mountains, the Moortown Formation or the Underhill Formation. And this would be what we call the Waits River Formation, all this blue. It's very calcium rich. So Vermont is, in terms of northern New England states, is known to be sort of the calcium-rich exception. And it's largely because of the Waits River Formation. And so you actually see in this little slice of the preserve different plant life. than you would see on this side of the preserve, just because of the higher calcium in the soil. And so Woodbury Mountain is mostly made of it's called phyllite. It looks like if you've seen the Green Mountains, it's that shiny, flaky material that like Camel's Hump in Mansfield is made of, with big quartz boulders embedded in it. So you've seen those all over Woodbury. There's one like right over there. These pink dots. So this is interesting. This is also kind of unique to this part of the Piedmont. Anyone know what these pink dots are? Granite. And so these actually is where I would argue with the biophysical regions. I think we also have pieces of the Northeastern Highlands, so the Northeast Kingdom. These pink blobs are the same composition as the White Mountains and the Northeast Kingdom and like Groton State Forest. So you actually see there's a big blob on Woodbury Mountain. As you go down 14 into Hardwick, you're looking up those big cliffs. That's granite. And that's what you're looking at. So you actually do have a granite intrusion, and if you walk that part of the property, you'll notice it's different. It feels different. There's different trees, there's big granite boulders.
Good luck getting up there.
Yeah,
I've been up there. That's spooky.
it's not a very accessible part of the property. Many of our preserves are not very accessible.
You can get there by the back of my house.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
so that's sort of what makes up Woodbury. Like I said, most of it kind of sits on this northern Green Mountain bedrock, but we have pieces of it that are on granite, on the White River Formation. And that informs the diversity of life we see on the property. This is a natural community map. All properties we conserve in Vermont, we have to map every natural community on the property. Most of our preserves, that's 400, 500 acres we're dealing with. On a preserve this size, it's quite a task. And so basically what a natural community is, it's just an assemblage of organisms. It's a classification system that ecologists, botanists use. So I could show this map to any ecologist or botanist in Vermont, and you kind of get the picture of what's going on in those areas. And typically how you see natural communities dispersed across the landscape you have these matrix communities that cover much of the landscape. And for here, that would be northern hardwood forest, your classic maple, beech, birch. But then embedded within those matrix communities, you have small patch natural communities. And that's anywhere you've got like a wetland or a little cold drainage or a cliff or something special or special geology that sort of has a different plant community. In the low-lying drainages here in Woodbury, you often see spruce and fir because it's cold air pooling from the mountains and there's not a whole lot of sunlight. And so those would be like lowland spruce fir forests as opposed to a hardwood forest. So you don't need to know what all these natural communities mean. You just need to know we've got a lot of them in Woodbury. So there are 97 natural communities in Vermont, and this kind of grows every once in a while as we decide, well, this one's a little bit different than this one, let's split it. But we're currently at 97, and so far in Woodbury we found 29 natural communities. So about a third of the diversity of natural communities in Vermont are represented here in Woodbury.
Is that map available somewhere?
It can be. I don't know if this is on we typically put the natural community maps on the website.
I don't know either.
But we do produce these basically to enroll in current use. We have to have these. So this could be, if you were to ask us for this, we could distribute it.
And I'm not an ecologist, so I don't know what all these communities are called. But because I've hung boundary signs around this entire perimeter and crossed through in many places, when you're walking on the land, I mean, you just hit areas that feel really, really different. Like all of a sudden you're in some little like pocket wetland, or you're somewhere where there's like granite and all these hemlocks, and you were just walking around, your typical northern hardwood forest. So it really changes, and you can tell even if you don't know what to call it.
And I will say, especially on a preserve this size, when we're making these maps, it's not 100% ground truth accurate. It's more like you're walking through and you get a feeling you're in a different spot, and that makes like scientists really uncomfortable when you're just like, oh, this feels different. But to be able to say this forest over here is clearly different, it's different plant compositions, different trees, this forest is clearly different, I have to draw a line where it changed. It's really hard to do. So you kind of have to once we get the pattern down, we can kind of go with aerial views and be like, there's more spruce over here, there's more hemlock over here. And so it's not 100% like accurate, but it gives you a general idea of what's where. And so a little bit, I'll run pretty quickly through just some of the projects going on in Woodbury. There's kind of 3 ways our jobs as ecologists is to learn about the preserves. Like Sophie's job as a steward is to steward the land. So she's on the land all the time, hanging signs, cleaning up trash, monitoring. As an ecologist, our job is to learn what's there and try to interpret it and figure it out. And we do that in multiple ways. Mainly, we have over 100 properties spread out throughout the region. And there's 2 ecologists. So we don't get a ton of time on the land. And something that's unique about Woodbury, and I didn't fully appreciate it until I worked for Newt, is that we get to visit this preserve a lot because it's very close to Montpelier. It's only 25 minutes from our office. It's very close to me, so I get to spend a lot of time here. And so we learn a whole lot about it. So us being boots on the ground, that's one way that we learn about the landscape. We have our own internal research we do at Newt, but there's only 2 of us doing that. So a lot of times we're relying on our stewards who are going out walking the landscape all the time. They're kind of our eyes and ears collecting data for us. But a huge part of it, especially in Woodbury, comes from the community. For whatever reason, Woodbury sort of attracts people who know a lot about the natural world. And so there are a lot of like regional experts in this area. We have like Matt Peters, who is a really great botanist who lives just down the road. And we have a wood turtle expert like just down the road. And and we have Eric Perkins, who's like a wildlife camera guru just down the road. So we have people who volunteer their time to help us learn about the preserve, which is great. So this is one of the internal projects that we work on at Newt, and we do this on a subset of our preserves. We basically pick a large preserve in a given state. So we have one in New York, one in Vermont, one in New Hampshire, one in Maine, and we're establishing one in Massachusetts when we get a preserve big enough, where we do permanent long-term monitoring plots. So these are 20 by 20 meter randomly generated plots, and we go out every 5 years and we remeasure the plots. So this is the Woodbury distribution. This was just randomly generated, and because they're randomly generated, you never know where you're going to end up. Sometimes you're in something that was logged like 10 years ago and it's nothing but blackberry, and you're sitting there all day counting plants. Sometimes you end up on the side of a cliff. Sometimes you end up in a swamp. You never know. But basically what we do, we set up this 20 by 20 meter square, and within that square we inventory every single plant species in that grid. And these are fixed, so there are permanent stakes that we put in, and we relocate them every time we go back.
Like mushrooms and...
We don't do fungi. That's part of a separate study we did. So this is just like herbaceous plants, so ferns, sedges, wildflowers.
Trees.
I think trees, any tree seedlings. I think our record is 160 species in one plot. And then we also measure every tree that's in that plot with a diameter, breast height tape.
160 plant species?
Yes, in one plot. So you can, so that's quite the diversity, yeah.
And the plot size again is?
20 meters by 20 meters.
How long
And
does that take you?
so it depends. Some of these plots with 2 people can take a full day. Sometimes we have 4 or more people, and it goes a little bit quicker. But it takes quite a while because we do plant inventory, then we measure every single tree's diameter that's in that plot. We also measure all coarse woody debris, so any log that's on the ground, we measure the length and the diameter and calculate the volume. And so it takes a long time. So something like Woodbury, this might take a full summer to sample. And we're due to resample it next year, so I get to be part of that fun.
So I stupidly asked several years ago, before I took the Master Naturalist course,
Yes.
why do you call it a biodiversity plot if you're just counting the plants. And the answer that I got was, well, the animals move around. And also, the diversity of the plant layer is a pretty good indicator of the diversity of the insects and animals that it can support.
And interestingly
So-
enough, something we're considering is pairing this with autonomous recording units, so they listen to birdsong. We're thinking about doing that, and basically you listen back to it, and as the forest changes over time, different bird species come in and out. So it's something we're thinking about experimenting with. It's basically just, it's like a camera trap you would use for wildlife, but instead of recording video, it's just sound, and you have it timed to turn on at dawn and dusk during the breeding season. And that's something we've been thinking about doing. Other land trusts are doing it, and so that's one thing we're looking at. But that's just one of our internal research projects we're doing. And then, like I said, a lot of our information comes from the community. This is on the Woodbury Preserve, just right off the edge of Woodbury Mountain, on those granite cliffs I was talking about. And a local botanist, Matt Peters, was out backcountry skiing one year, and he came to us and he's like, I think I found an old growth forest on Woodbury Mountain. So he told us about it. He's like, let's go back in the summer. So this summer we went and we investigated it. You can tell why it's an old forest. Try logging here. So we actually, this duff layer we're sitting on, we took a stick and we poked through, because we were sort of, it's called a cliff brow. It's like a spot that collects needle duff over years and years and years. And we wanted to know how thick the soil was just from the needles decomposing. It was about 4 feet thick, down to bedrock. It's like a sponge. We ate lunch and took a nap here. It was like a 90-degree day. But we decided to check out some of these old trees, and so we measured some of them with a DDH tape. This is measuring diameter at breast height. You might say this doesn't look like it's breast height, but you always go from the uphill side. That was standard. But we also brought an increment borer. That's what this tool is called, and it's basically you can cut a hole into the middle of the tree. It doesn't hurt the tree any more than like tapping it for sapwood. And then you put a little device in, you can extract an actual like core, and you can count the rings and get. If you're good at it, you can hit the center of the tree and you can get a good approximation. One problem is a lot of these trees are often hollow as they get older. They rot in the middle, so you don't get the full picture. So people have built models to try and guess how old the tree is. But we thought these trees were going to be ancient. They're really not that old. They're really only about 150 years old. But they've clearly never been logged. There's no evidence of logging or disturbance in there. So our theory is that it's just so steep in there that trees just can't get very old. There's constantly rock slides. We saw some trees that had just been cut in half by rocks falling. So they grow pretty large because no one's in there harvesting them. They have lots of soil that's been undisturbed for centuries. So yeah, this is one example of an old forest we weren't expecting to see in Woodbury, because we thought we knew that property pretty well, and it's been pretty heavily managed for a long time. So we weren't expecting to see some old growth forest. For those asking about fungi, this is a separate study we did, looking at, we found some places on Woodbury where some of the major diseases have not arrived yet, like hemlock woolly adelgid, emerald ash borer, and beech leaf disease are kind of the three we're the most worried about. They have not arrived, so we decided to do a baseline fungus survey. So we hired a couple mycologists, and they came out in the field with us, and we did similar to those grids. We did it with fungi, and the idea is that this is a baseline. We want to see how the fungal community changes over time. We're thinking a lot of things could happen, like a lot of trees could die, and then you suddenly get fungal diversity increase. Or as the forest ages and matures, you get more wood accumulating and you get more fungal diversity. So this was just one step. Let's do a baseline study and maybe revisit this in 5-10 years, see what's changed. This was a fun project. So to wrap up, this is sort of one way you can all get involved. Because, like I said, we leverage the community a lot to learn about the preserve, and we just happen to have all these experts living here, but you don't have to be an expert. So if you're familiar with the app called iNaturalist, you basically just take a photo and you upload it, and you don't even have to know what it is you took a photo of. A bunch of experts will try to identify it, and if 2 experts agree on the identification, it becomes research grade, and then we can use it as research. And we've actually done a series of walks led by our ecology staff, where we'll go out with like Brett Engstrom, who's on our board, or before I worked for Newt, I led one of these walks, and we went out looking for pollinators. And everyone who comes is basically taking photos the whole time. So if you're ever just wandering around the preserve and want to see something that's curious, or even if it's just something you've seen 100 times before and just want to like, you know, take a photo of it and upload it, we automatically get this dashboard is refreshed anytime someone takes a photo.
So you just upload it onto the app itself?
Yep. And then we drew a line, and this is a project called the Natural Diversity of Woodbury Mountain. And basically anything that falls within that line, whoever it was that uploaded it, we get notified. And so this was a screenshot from just a few days ago. So we're up to 414 species. I mean, that's vastly underrepresenting what's there. There's thousands of species. But we don't really know until we look. So if you're ever on the preserve and just wandering around, want to contribute to our work, take a photo, send it in, and right now we're at 973 observations. These green ones are the ones that have been positively ID'd and we can use in research. These are ones, mostly fungi, that have not been positively ID'd yet. So you'll notice that if you have the iNaturalist app, sometimes things get identified like in an instant, like 3 minutes later someone identifies it and it's research grade, and sometimes it can sit there for years and no one touches it.
Is eBird?
Does it take into account birdsong, or is it just photos?
It's photos. I think now you can upload videos and sounds. I think that changed recently.
Oh, okay.
But I will say this underrepresents birds a lot, because for a long time this only relied on photos, and if you've ever tried taking a photo with your phone of a bird. But there's also eBird. Similarly, we can go into eBird and draw a line around with the parcel, and all the bird data that's ever been recorded on the preserve comes to us. So that's another way you can do it. So these are citizen science or community science. And then just for fun, I figured I'd leave you all with this is kind of the most fun part of our job. Some days it's like my job to go out in the field with Eric and wander around and look at a good spot to put up cameras. So Eric Perkins shared with us kind of some of his favorite captures of the last couple years on the Woodbury Preserve. Some of the inhabitants here. So this is bobcat, kind of their classic habitat. These talus slopes.
We should turn the lights off for this part.
Chicken eater.
Yeah. Wait for it.
There is some audio, Jason, is it not
Oh,
turned
maybe?
up? Doesn't
It's
really
on.
matter, but,
Yeah.
okay.
So that would be probably a yearling.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, either a big first year or a smallish year though.
And if you're ever out in the spring, and I often will see owl feathers floating in a vernal pool. And in this instance, it's using it as a bath, it looks like, but often they're in there feeding on egg masses or amphibians. But next time you're walking through the woods, you find a vernal pool, look for feathers. They're usually floating around.
Yeah, it's,
Missing the hair on his back.
yeah, it's rubbed for the winter ticks, you know, but that'll grow back. That fur will grow back.
And a fisher.
Yep. Yeah, my theory is this is a female marking first.
Yeah.
And now the male is coming. It's a little bit bigger.
Yeah, he rolls all over it.
All right.
Thank you, Eric.
Yes, thank you. And I will say, Eric helped us. Like I said, our stewards are the eyes and ears of our properties, because as ecologists, we may only ever go to the property once when we're first acquiring it, and we're thinking, we're writing a report, and we might never go back to some of these properties, but the stewards are required to every year, so they're out on the landscape. So we've given them a bunch of cameras to put up, and Eric was very generous in giving us some of his secrets of the best places to put them, and so we did a little mini training session with all of our land stewards of like where to put cameras. And this is like, if you ever visit the Newt website, look at the Newt social media pages, this is like candy for our communications team. They love, they absolutely love wildlife. But anyways, that was, we have one more just wrap up slide.
Yeah, just the one with the, there you go.
So, thank you. If there's any time, we're happy. Whoop, that's not it.
Disappeared on you.
Disappeared.
Oh, there it is.
We're happy to answer questions. I know typically people in Woodbury aren't in a hurry. So we're happy to be here and answer questions if you want. I don't know if, oh yeah, we've got time.
Thanks, first of all.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I have a question about fires, like fire management, like so often, we don't have forest fires here too much, but out west there's prescribed burns and things like that. What do you think about that, especially with the droughts?
This is a hot topic in Massachusetts. So a lot of our region includes the coastal pine barrens in Massachusetts. And we actually have a preserve that's sort of right on the border of where those fire adapted systems are. And that's something we hear a lot, because like the Nature Conservancy will actively burn to maintain these ecosystems. And a lot of people are concerned if it's wildland, you'll lose those systems because they'll just, white pines will move in and grow in. So it is tricky. It's something we haven't really landed on yet as like, is this, I think one thing we look at is having wildlands as a baseline. So we can have one area where we don't burn and see what happens. And then you have all these other conserved lands owned by the TNC that does burn. But in terms of accumulating enough debris to be a fire hazard in our climate, we don't have any evidence that that's a real danger. But yeah.
As an organization, how do you handle invasives?
That's kind of our number one question. And so our wildlands ecology director, Shelby, this is kind of a passion of hers. So we have the benefit of a lot of our preserves in northern New England don't really have problems with invasive species yet. Knock on wood. And so our organization made a choice that we kind of weighed the options of invasive species management, which often, if you look at the budgets for a lot of land trusts, they spend a lot of volunteer time and a lot of organizational time treating invasive species. And in the long term, I think, knotweed is here on the landscape and it's always going to be here. We're not going to eradicate it. So it is tricky because our policy is just kind of let things go. And in some instances, if there is an introduction that we can stop, we'll treat it. But for the most part, like if you wander around the Woodbury Preserve, along the roads, the logging roads, you'll see some invasive species. It's actually part of our plot data. We almost never find invasive species. I think we found them once.
So is that more a philosophical decision or is it a financial decision?
It's both. So I think philosophical in the sense that as rewilding, we don't really want to choose the winners and losers. We understand that we brought them here, so a lot of people feel guilt, like we need to do something about it. But there's also a lot we don't know about them in terms of you tend to see a lot more invasive species pressure in southern New England, and it tends to be very closely associated with former agricultural land. So when the soil is disrupted in that way, where it was tilled and depleted and fertilized for a very long time, they seem to have a much bigger advantage there than they do in like timberland. And that seems to be pretty clear. Like we have this very clear, like our southern New England preserves, we see them, and our northern New England preserves, we don't. And when we do, they very rarely ever make it into the interior. So that's something we want to study long term, is like, do they travel in to the preserves, and do they spread?
Human invasives?
So like an invasive, good question. So invasive plant species is, I think, what most folks would refer to as an invasive. So like Japanese knotweed or barberry, what are some, honeysuckle. I'll say on the Woodbury Preserve, the only one I've ever seen is knotweed, and it's really just on the edge on County Road.
One thing that's a little different for us is we try to conserve larger parcels than a lot of smaller local land trusts. Like if you get a really big chunk of forest, things usually move in from the edges, and we try not to have a lot of edges. And they also come in on roads, on trails. For better or for worse, for you, we don't really make a lot of trails.
So not a lot of trails in that whole area?
We haven't made, so most of our ambassador preserves, we have one or two in each state. We make at least one, nice walking trail on an ambassador preserve. We have lots of other preserves that we don't make any trails on. At Woodbury, which is an ambassador preserve, we have not made a trail because there's roads, there's Eagle Ledge Trail, which is a town trail. There's West Woodbury, Slayton Pond, Woodbury Mountain Road. There's Dog Pond Road coming in, there's Tallman Road coming in, and there's a whole bunch of old skid trails that you can walk. So we don't really have the need to build trails there. There is, as most of you probably know, there is the trail going up from the parking lot to the summit, which we didn't build, but we're have allowed one particular local person to maintain it, who's gone out there with me, and they're kind of keeping it open. So it's not necessarily the best place to build a trail because it's so steep and it's next to water, and I don't know how long it'll be there, but yeah.
That's where you build the parking lot, right?
Yeah, to get to the waterfall, and also there's, because you can get to the waterfall first, and then there's the old logging road that goes up there too that you walk on for a little while before you take the trail to the summit. And that also goes quite a ways, and there is some deadfall over it, but I always go around it or over it. But that goes to another couple of waterfalls that are also really beautiful. So there's good walking from that parking area, and I know a lot of people like to go up there and backcountry ski, or
Yep.
well, they usually get up in from the other side. But
And most of our preserves, well, all of our preserves, public access is allowed. Most of our preserves, access is extremely difficult, and you really wouldn't want to access them. But that's what we mean by ambassador preserves. We have a subset of preserves that we like, that are accessible, and those are the ones we like direct people to, like go visit these. Though you can visit any preserve you want. We have a subset of ones that we encourage people to visit. Woodbury is one of them, and recreation is sort of as some land trust recreation's like their priority, like Stowe Land Trust or like Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust. Their primary mission is to provide access to people, and for us that's like sort of the lowest priority. Our first priority is just acquiring the land and letting it rewild, and then recreation is sort of the bottom
Where it's
rung.
compatible.
Yeah,
There
where
is
it's
recreation
compatible.
on the preserve because there's the Vast Trail, and we do renew that license. Coming down from Shepherd's Hill, up Woodbury Mountain Road, to Tolman and out, and also up to Hardwick. And then you can drive on the class 4 roads, Woodbury Mountain Road and Tolman Road, or, you know, you can, if you have a good enough Jeep.
Whether you've had any abuses up there.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've spent a lot of time brushing in spur trails where people go, because you can legally ride on the road. You can stand up if you've helped me brush in trails. I see several people here. So they're, especially on the Elmore Eagle Ledge Trail, which the town of Elmore has designated as a non-motorized town trail.
Really?
Yes, I finally got to the bottom of that, and that's the designation when they went down from a class 4 road to a town trail. But they haven't signed it, and they don't have the capacity to, you know, they don't have the finances or a police for, like, who's gonna monitor that? So there's a lot of driving in there that's really the road, the trail isn't even where it's mapped by the town on V-Trans anymore. It's kind of moved into the Elmore stream. And so the riding in there is really sad to see because the erosion is terrible and it kind of just runs with the river itself. So there's some, but you know, we've done a lot of work to kind of brush in some spur trails that come off of Woodbury Mountain Road, and a lot of that has been respected. It's a lot of it's held. I think most people follow the rules if they know what they are, and there's a few people who
When you
don't.
say Woodbury Mountain Road, which one do you mean?
West Woodbury Road, Slayton
The one
Pond
that
Road.
goes straight through the
Yeah,
village?
it's the red north-south one
Okay.
there. Comes up off County Road down there.
Changes names like 3 times.
Yeah, and then it comes out, yeah, in the
The one
center
we
there.
call, the town calls Woodbury Mountain Road is the one that comes up from County Road and goes straight up.
Yep,
Yep.
yep. That's the one. I think we're talking about the same.
And
Yeah,
then,
where's-
And then it turns to
next to the,
Woodbury. It's locally known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail at this point in time.
Oh, the extension of the Dog Pond
Yeah.
Road. So Dog
Push
Pond
up
Road going
over
west.
And then down to the, was,
right,
Yeah.
it used to be called the Four Corners.
It used to be called Nate Nelson Road, but Pat Bridget, because the Nelsons lived up there, their old foundations up there.
I don't know if you have the answer to this, but if people have some land, like just small pieces or something that they want to preserve, but they still live there, but they want, can you put some kind of, I don't know, easement on your property saying this should be forever wild except for the house or anything?
Talk to the Northern Rivers Land Trust.
Yeah, yeah,
How big?
yeah. That's a really good thing to do. It's not. We don't hold a lot of easements on private landowners. We used to do that a long time ago. But we hold them more on other conservation organizations like TNC or the Forest Society of Maine or whoever, Vermont Land Trust. Yeah, in the Northeast, we hold the easement on Burnt Mountain and West Mountain, which are both really big TNC properties. And we have the Forever Wild easement on them, so I monitor those every year. But we don't own the land. Kind of the reverse of what happens at Woodbury, where we own the land, but Vermont River Conservancy holds the easement. And the reason we do that is because, like Jason said before, if a town or a land trust owns the land, it's protected as long as, you know, in a one particular way. However, the current board or the current management strategy wants it to be managed, and that can change. And so if you're going to have an old forest, you want that protected in perpetuity, and a conservation easement runs with the land. So even if Northeast Wilderness Trust dissolves and the land gets transferred to some other environmental organization like TNC or somebody, the easement runs with the land. So all the same protections will be there even if we go away. It's like having a right of way for a town on your property or something. So it's a double protection.
All right.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
you all.
This is great.